Hi guys, welcome to episode 3 of Frequently Asked Friday here from LANet. I'm Connor, I'm joined by Matesh. He's back this week. Today we're going
Hello.
to be going over two questions that we've gotten discussing both Azure certification and how you should tackle that, as well as working from home. So the first question we've got here is what are the best steps to get certified in Azure? So Matesh, why don't you take us with this one? Where did this one
Yeah,
come in from?
brilliant. This one came in through a contact that I used to work with on LinkedIn, and they're already Azure certified, but mostly in the security area. They want to get more into Azure infrastructure, so they're kind of asking what kind of path to take on that, really.
Oh, fantastic. And so this is for kind of people that are just getting into it. This is kind of for everyone.
So the path and the certification that I'll talk about is for everyone. In this case, it was for somebody who's had a bit of experience, which is always better. So what we tend to do is make sure people have got the experience. So in our team, as you know, we'll make sure people can actually do the stuff and then go for the certification just as a kind of a approval stamp from Microsoft. What we don't really encourage is people to just go and sit an exam, just for the sake of it, but not actually have any real world experience, because there's a lot of that going on, and yeah, it's not the best approach.
Yeah. So in terms of those sort of, real world skills, those basics that you would want before maybe taking an Azure cert or to have, as a
Yeah,
baseline, what are those kind of things of what we're talking about?
yeah. Good question. So in terms of the basics, so if you do want to get into Azure infrastructure, what you really need to know is the basics of networking, for example, right? So you need to know about compute, maybe virtualization as well, but the key areas where it gets more complex is the networking element. So you've got to understand DNS, understand it really well. How does DNS work? How do you troubleshoot it? What are some of the tools that you can use and when to use them? I'm thinking of doing a little video on that as well, because we did have some questions outside of this about basic network troubleshooting and things. So we should go through that as well at some point in a future video.
Yeah, definitely. What kind of certification paths are we talking about then to sort of get started? Where, what should people be looking at if they've got those basics in place?
Yeah, so I think once you've got the basics in place, a basic understanding of network infrastructure, that is not necessarily Azure, you want to start looking at AZ-104. So that's kind of the Azure Administrator exam. But not just do the exam. You actually need to, have some experience, which we'll talk about in a minute. But once you've got AZ-104, the administrator exam, you want to start looking at AZ-700. There is some overlap in the two, so it's a good transition to go to 700 after AZ-104.
Awesome, awesome. Now that I've got my two certs, am I ready to work in Azure? Am I going to get a job? Are you going to hire me?
Good question. No, it's a short answer. No. So we we like people who've got certifications. That's great. But what we actually need is people who've got the experience. So if you've got certifications, it doesn't really mean you can do the stuff that you actually need to do. So the certifications, in my view, personally, help you understand the basics, right? Understand the basic theory, like what is an in AZ-104 networking, what is an NSG, right? What is an Azure policy? But actually putting that into practice is a different ball game. So it's um, kind of like your driving test, I guess. You don't actually really learn how to drive until you've actually done it.
Yeah.
And a lot of it is theory up to that point. So you wouldn't really, I might be going off on a tangent here, but you wouldn't really trust the driving instructor who's only passed his theory test if it's not really done it. So what
Yeah.
you actually need is that hands-on experience.
Cool. So in terms of obviously, if you don't have that job yet, how are you getting that hands-on experience? How are you getting that practical work?
Yeah. So one way to do that is you can sign up for, like, if it's Azure you want, or any cloud really, you can sign up for a free account. There's a lot of resources, including VMs, including VPN gateways in Azure. You can set up a free account, use some free resources. You get a certain number of resource hours per month. You can then practice on that. So how do I build a network? How do I create a VM or a web app? Then how do I set up access to that VM from various places? How do I lock that down? How do I secure it? How do I get things talking across networks? How do I troubleshoot that connectivity? How do I set up private endpoints? All that is available pretty much for free with your free Azure account. And you've also got the MS Learn, obviously. So you've got your MS Learn. If you go to aka.ms/learn, get the knowledge training there. So you can look at by role. So as your administrator or network engineer, you can follow the course there. It's a free course. And I definitely recommend you do that. And then start thinking about, okay, how do I expand, going beyond just creating one server, for example. How do I create a hub and spoke network and get things working together? How do I create a firewall, for example, and build those things and then break them and fix them? And that's when you really learn how to do this stuff.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, speaking of the MS Learn paths, within those paths as well, they also do have labs to give you some hands-on experience.
Yes.
So, if you've got your free account and you're, can set up some networks and whatnot, there are some more pricier resources in Azure, things like your firewalls, Papa VPN. There are labs then and that kind of set up instances of Azure for free and aren't going to cost you anything. So if you're maybe worried about that, there are labs within those Learn paths that can help you set up those pricier resources.
Yeah, brilliant. Good. And I think after that, once you've got confident and comfortable doing those kind of things, start looking at infrastructure as code, right? Once you can then start doing things like Bicep, Terraform, use Azure DevOps, that's when you can actually land the job and actually get to keep it. So yeah, those kind of would be my tips in terms of Azure infrastructure. If you want to go beyond the AZ104, AZ700, then start thinking about the architect, expert architect, or AZ500 is always useful as well for the security elements of infrastructure.
Yeah, Mitesh, definitely agree with you there on all those points. Let's jump on over to our next question.
Yep. So the question I think you got this week, I'll let you explain that, is, how do you work more effectively when we're all working at home? So some tips on that then, to just tell us how that came about and what your answer was.
Yeah, so I think this is a question that comes up quite a lot whenever we go to events or, meetups or anything like this, where, you talk about your role when you mention that you work from home. And you have people that say, "Oh, I'd love to," or "I could never," or how do you do it? They maybe have struggles in the past, perhaps over COVID when they were working from home, they found it difficult. And so there's a couple of things that I've done, having kind of worked from home, for myself now for quite a while, and to sort of help with that. So one of the major things is making sure you sort of separate your work life and personal life. So obviously a big part of that can be a dedicated space. Now, if you have the luxury to have your own room to do that in, that's fantastic. Obviously, not everyone has that, but even dedicating, a portion of your dining table or a corner of your room, something that is for your work and that you can, go there to do work and then leave at the end of the day or leave during your lunch hour, whatever it is, have that separation between your personal life and your work life. I think something you do have to be careful of as well is sort of mixing the personal tasks in your work hours. You can be can look very enticing to say, "Oh, I've got 5 minutes, let me go, clean this room, or let me go tidy up here or something during your work." But I think not only is that obviously going to affect your work, but it affects your personal life as well when you begin to mix and mesh those things. You begin to have less separation. So I think making sure you sort of really separate those both in personal and work is super important.
Okay, and I've seen the way, I think you do it really effectively. How do you manage your work day and the time around that yourself?
Yeah, I think, a big thing there is, having some sort of routine or perhaps like some sort of time management system or just technique that you use. So obviously there are kind of several of these that help sort of maximize your productivity and your focus as well. One of them is called Pomodoro, which is sort of a system where you work in 25-minute chunks with 5-minute breaks in between. And after having, four of these 25-minute chunks, you then have a longer 15-minute break. I think at first this sort of looks like it might be more break than work, but it actually ends up being in about kind of a 5 hour chunk, 4 hours of work and a 1 hour break. Now,
Yeah.
for you, 25 minutes might not be enough. Maybe you do half an hour, 40 minutes. But I think the big portion, the big thing to get away from this is just having, chunks of work time separated by these short breaks.
Yeah, definitely.
Not only is it good for your mental health just to take a step away for a moment, but it can also be good for your work as well to come back to your work after this break with fresh eyes. You're not staring at your screen for hours at a time.
That's a good point. Yeah, so you've got the health aspect of it. There's also your, the way your actually brain, absorbs information. There's also that I've heard of that technique, and I use it myself for reading. So it's rather than reading for 1 hour straight, your brain will only take in the first 20 minutes and remember the first bit and the last bit. So what you really need to do is take that 20 minutes or 25 minutes, whatever, have a break and start again. You retain a lot more information. So especially when you're studying, that's really, really important. So I think it works really well for working in small concentrated chunks. And I do that myself, and I find I get a lot more done in them small concentrated times rather than spending 2 or 3 hours trying to do a bunch of tasks. So that's really good. Do you get any of the methods for managing the different types of work that you do?
Yeah, so there are a couple as well. One of them is the Eisenhower matrix. This essentially categorizes your work into four different types. So you've got like your urgent and important, your important but not urgent, your urgent but not important, and neither urgent nor important. Again, this sort of just lays out all of your work, so you can see, okay, what do I need to tackle now? What should I be putting off? Is there anything that needs to, how to best sort of organize and categorize your work, and take it in the day, and then you can then take that most important stuff first and sort of leave the less important stuff towards the end of the day.
That's cool.
Yeah, there's another one. It's kind of a kind of funny one that I found when I was researching some of this, which is called the "Eat That Frog."
Yeah.
Which is sort of inspired by a Mark Twain quote, or at least a quote attributed to him.
That's a good one. I like that one.
The quote is, "Eat a live frog first thing in the morning, and nothing worse will happen to you for the rest of the day." Now, obviously, this is kind of about tackling that most unchallenged or most kind of unpleasant task first thing in the morning. Is sort of give yourself that sense of accomplishment. So, you can say, hey, what did I do today? I did this thing. You'd hit a most difficult task head on. And it kind of helps you set yourself up for the rest of the day to go, cool, I did that. And I feel like once you get into that work mode and you've accomplished something, it's much easier to continue working,
Absolutely.
So definitely an option.
Definitely, that's definitely something I use as well, and it works really well when you've got a set list of tasks. So once you've got your task list of the things that you will need to get done that day, you look through that list and pick the worst one you really don't want to do, bring that to the top, and then the rest of the tasks, if that's just a practical example of how I use it. Bring the worst one you don't want to do, put that to the top of the list, get that out of the way, and the rest of the day's a lot easier, and you're not dreading that thing for the whole day, so just get it out of the way. Brilliant. No, that's a really good one. Totally agree with that one. It's really good. So any other tips?
Yeah, I mean, I think just at the end of the day, whatever it is you do, whether, there's plenty of different methods and systems out there, but it's finding something that works for you and adjusting it to you. So like I say, with that Pomodoro, 25 minutes might not be enough. So adjust that time, adjust those break times, find something that works best for you. Don't feel like, locked into something you read online or read in a book. Figure something out that works for you best. And kind of regardless of that, especially in our line of work, when you're working with a lot of screens and computers all day, taking regular breaks just to, take your eyes away from the screen. Even if you have a book sitting next to you that you can pick up in those 5-minute breaks and read, I think that's good, because it means you're not going to go pick up your phone. I think we're all done that in the past, where we want to take a break from our big screen, and so we end up taking a break on our smaller screen. So something that gets you away from just screens entirely can definitely help.
Brilliant. No, that's really good. That's a really good point. And for me, my phone, half the time I don't know where it is, so I'm happy I don't go straight onto that. So it's pretty good for me.
That works as well.
Yeah, brilliant. So no, thanks for that. That was a good Q&A. It's nice to not do a fully technical one for a change. So more about how to get things done, how to manage your day, your time, and study. So some good tips there on studying. So thanks for those who watched. Let us know if anybody watched it, and see you next week. Thanks very much, Connor.
Thank you, Mitesh.